Well, welcome to session 3. I think most of you probably know me from this morning, but I'm Eliza Bechtold from the University of Oxford, and we have 4 speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Gwenaëlle Bauvois. Sorry, I practiced that too, sorry. She's a researcher at the University of Helsinki.
Oh, yes, the clicker.
And holds a PhD in sociology. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, thank you for the organizer for this wonderful event, and it's nice to see such a full room, so very happy to be here. So now I try to click in the right direction. Yes. So in the last decade in Europe, we have witnessed a marked feminization of the far right. Of course, with the rise of female leaders, of course, Marine Le Pen, Meloni, Vaidapura in Finland, which is the context that I'm also studying. But not only the radical right gender gap that has been long observed in radical right voting has been narrowing and decreasing significantly, which means that women are voting more and more for the far right. And for instance, in France, we can see it as a very striking example. So the women voting for the far right parties increased from 20% in 2019 to 30% in 2024. So it's increasing all the time. And in parallel to that, we can also see the rise of what Sarah Faris is calling the femo-nationalism, that you probably are familiar with. So it's the instrumentalization of gender equality and feminist rhetoric in order to legitimize nationalist anti-immigration and especially anti-Muslim politics. And scholars in Europe and elsewhere have documented this shift towards female leadership and female-coded forms of far-right activism. In my paper, examine a specific case study, which is the far-right self-proclaimed feminist group. So far-right women who are calling themselves feminists, who are calling themselves actually the real feminists. So that's what I call the far-right feminist, which offer a very illustrative case of the feminization process of the far right. And I argue that it exemplifies the convergence of online hate speech, street-level mobilization, and structural alliances with violent far-right actors across the ecosystem, demonstrating how digital discourse can lead to real life harm. Yeah, and the main question that I'm trying to answer with these studies is that how do far-right feminist movement action demonstrate a tangible connection between online hate speech and offline mobilization, especially how do alliances with violent far-right actors and the organization of physical event translate a digital ideology into concrete action, thereby blurring the line between discourse and potential incitement. So just to say a few words about the methodology, I'm a researcher, so all the time I have to say something about that. If I'm able to change the slide, yes. So I'm basically using a multimodal digital ethnography. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's basically non-participant observation across different kind of platform, discourse and visual analysis, and cross-platform tracking of affective repertoires, iconography, and interactional norms. And also I've been systematically documenting the physical intervention, so infiltration during marches, performances, media appearances, and legal studies. But I won't be going so much into detail with all this practicality. So what do we mean with the far-right feminism? A little bit like the genealogy of this phenomena. So the right-wing far-right feminism is nothing new. Reactionary feminist movements have long existed. For instance, in the 70s, the Catholic women's movement or the US Stop Era campaign in the United States. And so the scholars are now analyzing this movement as early expression of conservative and reactionary feminism. So again, it's nothing new, but we of course are facing now contemporary reframing of this kind of feminism. So even if the phenomenon of far-right feminism is that we are referring to in this presentation is nothing new, as such, it is something that we could already see a few years ago. And if we take the context of France that I've been studying, the real turning point has been around 2012 with the rise of La Manif pour tous, which was a response to the Taubira law that was legalizing the same-sex marriage in France. And many scholars identify La Manif pour tous as a catalyst for this new wave of right-wing and far-right mobilization around gender, and especially mobilization organized by women and for women. So far-right feminism doesn't represent a significant and radical departure from existing paradigms, or whether there is a striking new visibility in the public debate and a striking mediatization of far-right feminism, especially in the context of France, but not only. It's something that we can see all over the world, and as far also as Argentina, for instance. And according to some, the movement is unique in a way that it's the first far-right women's movement to be founded by women and in the name of women, and to have gained momentum. And that is, of course, something important that makes it really contemporary. And it is distinctive for several reasons. So I'm this is the collective that I am studying. It is, I don't know, maybe some of you have been hearing about this collective Nemesis that was founded in 2019, and it's named after the Greek goddess of vengeance. And it was founded by a young group of women, very young, like some of them, they were even under 18, and they were rejecting the leftist dictate of traditional feminism, and they present themselves as being the island where the castaway of feminism can take refuge, and as whistleblowers, and also as an organization for victims of gender-based violence. And their first goal is to denounce violence against women, but more specifically Western women, especially against the violence they face in the hands of foreign men. So their idea of women's protection is quite limited. And as I said, they've gained really a lot of visibility and traction, and there are several reasons for this. No, I'm going in the wrong direction. Yes, there it is. So there are several structural factors to explain their rapid growth and visibility in France, but not only. So first of all, they receive a lot of financial and media support from far-right and right-wing media moguls like Vincent Bolloré and Pierre-Édouard Sterrin, that gives them a lot of access to mainstream media, for interviews, for being commentators in a lot of TV show, radio show, and so on. They also have very professional communication strategies. So they have very well crafted aesthetics, coordinated intervention and high production value content that circulates very widely on many different kinds of platforms. And they are also very media savvy in a way that they are very young, attractive, young women, very photogenic, and this increases, of course, their resonance in reactionary media, but also attracts a lot of attention in the mainstream media. And last, they also have been expanding transnationally. They have, for instance, opened branches in Switzerland, Belgium, Italy, and Spain, contributing to a pan-European sisterhood, as they call it. And they also have collaborated with similar female far-right activist group, but also in general identitarian far-right groups throughout Europe. So they are not operating, all of that to say that they are not operating in isolation. I hope now I'm able to, again, yes, I was too quick. Yes, that they are very much embedded into the European far-right ecosystem. They don't operate in isolation. Its presence, its visibility, its influence are consistently enabled by the collaboration with other organizations within the far-right ecosystem. And it illustrates some kind of division of labor in the extremist mobilization. So for instance, they rely on different actors like Action Française with the far-right monarchist movement that serves as an ideological base. And they also collaborate with Cocarde Étudiante, with the far-right student association that is active in many campuses around France. And they are also counting on neo-Nazi groups like Zouave Paris and Division Martel for providing protection during their street action. And some of them are really well known for their physical violence, and some of them have been even carrying weapons during this action. So through these alliances, Nemesis becomes a gender gateway into broader extremist network. And Nemesis really shows the shift from online hate speech to offline harassment as well. So there has been many legal complaints for hate speech, harassment, and defamation against them. They've been going to court on many occasions already. It includes, for instance, charges filed by the Besançon mayor for racist incitement and defamation, cyber stalking campaign against an elderly activist who had to go into hiding because he received some death threat, also harassment of trans activists and left-wing student activists. And as we know, the research has consistently shown that online hate induces, yes, thank you, real-world fear and insecurity and psychological harm. And Nemesis uses the plausible deniability, saying that basically they don't overtly incite their followers to take actions against, but their rhetoric vilifies specific targets, creating what is called a gray zone incitement. And their influence exceeds their formal membership, operating through affective publics mobilized via outrage and identification. And just to then conclude, because I have like 1 minute left, so maybe I go to the last slide. Yeah, I had something about that, the fact that they perform victimhood, so are basically saying that we are the real victim. So they operate a moral inversion and this kind of moral binary, saying that we are the good and they are the evil. They are actually using this term. And they, of course, mobilize nationalist moral superiority. So just to really conclude, just a few points. So far-right feminism is not a marginal curiosity, but it's a strategic and professionalized mode of extremist mobilization. And it also, the hate speech serves as a mobilizing infrastructure, translating into physical confrontation at times and real-life harassment. And it's a powerful combination of aesthetics, affects, and alliances with violent actors. So in sum, their activism shows how contemporary far-right movement weaponize feminism to fuel polarization, fear, and increasingly real-world violence. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bauvois. So our next third paper in this session is Anti-Gender Coalitions and Populist Attacks on Sex Education in Belgium. And our speakers are Professor Katrien Jacobs, who's an associate professor in the School of Arts and Social Sciences at Monash University, Malaysia, and Katelijne Lievens. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name correctly, but who is an aspiring PhD student. She obtained 2 master's degrees, one in conflict development and development studies and one in gender and diversity studies, both magna cum laude. So I will turn it over to you.
Hi, welcome everyone to this talk on Belgium, on anti-gender coalitions and populist attacks on sex education in our little Belgium. Welcome to Belgium, everyone. We have a lot of anti-gender here as well, unfortunately. So we collaborated, Katelijne and myself, and we each carried out case studies about these anti-gender attacks online. And Katelijne focused more on EVRA's, the attacks on sex education, a specific program called EVRA's, and she will talk a little bit more about that. And at the same time, I was focusing on attacks on the genderbread cookie, genderbread person, in Dutch called genderkoek. So this happened before and during the federal elections, both in Belgium and the Netherlands. I also mentioned the Netherlands because a lot of the rhetoric taken up in Belgium actually was already pioneered in the Netherlands. I also, think that, I'm also influenced by gender theory, and I think Judith Butler's book on anti-gender movements, Who's Afraid of Gender, I think that she has taken a strong stance in that book, and she also explains that gender has become a phantasm, an accelerated form of moralism, no longer a box to be ticked or an academic concept, but a phantasm that collects and escalates a multitude of modern panics. I think all the presentations so far have already shown that point. But it also is very hard to deal with phantasms. I think it is true that we see these things, emerging. We see it really affecting individual society. And so the question on how to counter a phantasm, or coming up with a counter phantasm, or just deconstructing a phantasm, is a very difficult one. But anyway, the one we are dealing with is the phantasm that children would be sexualized through emancipatory sex gender cultures. And so, for instance, as Katelijne will also explain, there is this idea that schools and sex education will sexualize children. It's a very common idea through misinformation campaigns. Also, sexual minorities, for instance, drag queens, will automatically sexualize children, and also the little genderbread cookie there, the genderbread, if students are taught by means of this educational advice, it will also sexualize them. I think this has become a very common phantasm, and I think it is also already very old, starting, for instance, in the 1990s, when the internet came about, and a lot of countries were arguing against any kind of sexually explicit media online because it would harm children. So this is partially very popular because it's a very old kind of fearful idea. And we saw it, definitely flourishing here in Belgium, both in French-speaking Belgium, in Brussels, and in Flanders during the last federal elections. So we studied that as online discourse coalitions. And that idea comes from a Dutch media theorist, Heyer, just the idea that several types of discourse can be easily shared amongst groups or individuals whose ideologies don't align at all. Yeah? So certain imagery, certain hate speech becomes very popular and can cross different ideological frontiers, so to speak. And I think gender and anti-gender is definitely doing that. So this is the idea by Martin Heyer. There is an illusion of oneness also, even though actors may have disparate ideological backgrounds. So I'm turning it now to Katelijne, who's going to explain the attack on EVRAS.
So our first case study focuses on EVRAS. EVRAS stands for l'éducation à la vie relationnelle, affective et sexuelle, and it contains the rules about sexual education in Wallonia and parts of Brussels. Its main aim is to provide trustworthy information to children and to create a positive look on sexuality. And based on this, school directors are asked to take initiatives to organize like school hours, to work together with specialized centra, such as health promotion services. Earlier, it consisted of some loose guidelines, but starting from 2023-2024, it became a mandatory subject in school. So school directors had to organize at least one activity of 2 hours in the 6th grade of primary school and one activity of 2 hours in the 4th grade of high school. And this led to a lot of protest. As you can see, there are many groups that protested against EVRAS. It started with an open letter from a children's psychiatrist that was signed more than 7,400 times. And this also led to a lot of conspiracy theories. So the fear from sexual education was turned into a fear of sexualization for the children. For example, the idea that 5-year-olds would learn how to masturbate was a very heavily debated topic. And the coalition against EVRAS was quite unusual. It consisted of many groups that are often seen as complete opposites, but they were now able to unite as a front of conscience against this one big evil. So there were 5 main groups, as you can see on the screen. The first one was led by Radia Oulepsir, and she had the support of 7 Belgian Muslim organizations. She's also famous on YouTube under the name of Omri Omri. And a second group was led by Nicolas Lefebvre. He found Bon Sang Belgique, which translates as Common Sense Belgium. This was found during COVID times against COVID measures. And Nicolas invited Daniel de Wolf, who founded Zone Libre, which is also a group that was founded during COVID times and which aims to protect the Belgian constitution, as according to them, many COVID measures were unlawful. Civitas was also a big group, and that's a French Catholic movement. And the last main group was Sauvons nos enfants, which is an organization that is heavily inspired by QAnon, because as you can see, they translated one of the big campaigns of QAnon, Save Our Children. These groups are also supported by other people and organizations, such as the far-right political party Vlaams Belang. At first sight, it might seem that they are ununitable and might even be a bit hostile towards each other, like the far-right political party working together with the Muslim organizations. But as Heyer describes, they have reinforced these coherent storylines about sex and about gender, and they have become allies in one vision that the government should not get involved in the upbringing of children. It also helps that some of these groups were also resisting the COVID measures. And as you can see, also many news outlets were very eager to report on this strange coalition. The groups themselves were also very active on social media and on their websites. They even went as far as to call for parents to take the children out of school altogether as a form of protest. And important to know is that these groups are able to create an appearance of unity as if they are one big united front against sexual education. And they are held together by a common understanding of the nature of the problem, that the government should not get involved in bringing up your children. This also quickly escalated into conspiracy theories, as mentioned before, like 5-year-olds will learn how to masturbate and porn will be shown to 9-year-olds. And this is also something that rapper Prof tweeted. He's a French rapper, and this also caused a lot of protest in France, which is a bit ironic because Evras has absolutely no influence on the French educational system. And all this online content relied on heavily emotive language, on visuals, and a lot of misinformation that caused these groups even to go further and further. They called for parents to wake up and to protect their children. But the irony is that in order to protect children, children were taken out of schools, and schools were even set on fire as a part of the protest.
Okay, so at the same time, I was also doing a case study about the genderkoek, the revulsion, online revulsion against the genderbread person. And so this was actually, my case study was done about Flemish online media, and Katelijne is more about French and Brussels, but we put it together to find what these campaigns actually would have in common. But again, it's based on this idea that the LGBTQIA community is taken over, becoming dominant, becoming dictatorial, and so this genderkoek would be rammed down the throats of their children. This was one of the sentiments that they were spreading. This is, of course, the argument we can find everywhere. As I said before, it came actually in this region of the EU, also from the Netherlands, from Geert Wilders, the Dutch far-righter, Geert Wilders, who's extremely popular in Flanders. And he already had given speeches also about genderkoek. And so in 2024, some of his rhetoric was taken over, and there was also what we saw also that the mainstream media were sort of also taking over these ideas. Yeah? So there were programs for youth who were first-time voters, and they could come to the studio and they could debate ideas and to make up their mind what they were going to vote for. And then so this anti-gender rhetoric was just one of the topics that the youth were, able to debate. And all this misinformation just circulated in these programs as well. As if those young people also would already know exactly a lot about gender ideology, and also about genderkoek. But to go back, can I play this video actually? I just also wanted to show this video from Geert Wilders because it illustrates very well the gender phantasm that I also mentioned. And it's a TikTok video this time, and so somebody actually turned it into this nice music video, one of the TikTok influencers. So I would like to show it, but I don't know if it's possible to... here we go. But I don't have sound, or what? Do we have sound, or... No. Okay, then we're not going to get the full effect of this beautiful video. Because it's set on this very kind of menacing industrial music that the person who made the video did. Anyway, so it's this condensation of primal fears about gender, including, here we go. It's a condensation. It perfectly illustrates this idea that gender is a phantasm, the genderbread cookie, pansexuals. We are supposed to be against pansexuals, gender neutrals, like all this terminology, all this new terminology, but also Moroccans. So it throws in the Moroccans there as well somehow. So it's this is all gender. And so whole idea of genderkoek, of course, yes, I will quickly wrap it up. I just want to say that genderkoek also is very new in Belgium. It was introduced by another NGO, Savaria, in 2021 as a tool that could be used by organizations. They put it on a website and gave teachers or organizations an option to use this to explain things to children. It was all very new and very tentative and very well contextualized, what you could do with it, but the whole idea of it becoming misinformation is that everybody will need to know about this cookie, and also that this cookie would have this magical effect on children, like they would become sexualized to it, so they would start having weird, erotic, and pornographic fantasies. So we go to the conclusion now. Sorry, we know that we are out of time, so we'll have to do it very quick. 1 minute, okay? All right. Okay.
Okay, so as these case studies show that the fear of sexualization is often turned into like conspiracy theories, and it's often packed together with other social fears, such as the fear from COVID vaccinations and others. All these anti-gender groups are very active on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, also on YouTube. So it's very important to also take a look at the influence on the youth. Also, the influence of the Trump administration in the coming years is very important to keep in mind, because since the new inauguration, they have been targeting diversity, equity, inclusion programs, and they are also like finding new anti-gender tools, such.
Show the last slide. We have a beautiful slide.
Such as Teen Star, which aims to preach about sexual abstinence amongst teenagers. Recently, Teen Star Belgique was also found, so it's very important to keep in mind that they are also gaining more and more influence amongst young people here. So we think that overall we can conclude it's still very important to keep fighting for an inclusive sexual education. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, our fourth speaker is online.
Thank you so much for the opportunity for having me here. I'm very honored to share this presentation with you all. I'm very, very excited. Thank you to the editorial board, organizing committee of Echoes of Hate, to the chairwoman for the opportunity to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Renzo Diaz Giunta. It is a real honor for me to be part of this conference, joining you from Latin America, specifically from Peru. And I would like to begin with a simple but uncomfortable question. In this context that we live in right now globally, who protects democracy when the digital sphere, the digital space, becomes space of fear rather than debate? Let's take a look at what's happening online. Over the past 2 decades, social media platforms such as Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Telegram, Discord, they have dominated the public space. They have radically transformed how we communicate with each other, how we can organize, and how we can participate in public life. They have allowed us the opportunity to stay connected, just like we are right now. I'm in Latin America, you guys are in Europe, but we are able to communicate, we are able to engage in real time. Social platforms, social media, they have allowed us to democratize access to information in ways that, let's say, 30 years ago, they were thought to be impossible. A generation ago, even worse. Voices once excluded in the public mainstream discourse, such as activists, ethnical minorities, dissidents, now have a space to be visible, to hear their voices loud and clear, to have the possibility to spread their ideas, their opinions, their messages. But alongside this democratic promise, we do have a problem. Another reality has emerged. We live in a world in which we have a polarized society. We can choose a topic, people are going to have opinions, but sometimes these opinions can lead to discrepancies that go beyond the democratic ways of expressing that dissent. And that usually can contribute to make our societies institutionally fragile. We have these social media platforms that are wonderful for communicating, but they can also amplify voices that can weaponize their messages against others who think different or who are different, and they are intimidated, harassed, or even silenced. Online hate speech nowadays no longer stays online. It shapes public opinion, delegitimizes democratic actors, and increasingly puts lives at risk. Let's look at the tragedy that just happened in Australia. Usually, those people are incentivized by other people online who spread hate, who spread lies, and eventually somebody takes that hate from online and decides to take it offline to the real world with serious and devastating consequences. Today, I want to talk to you about the case of Jeannine Dauder at the Meta Oversight Board, because this case explores this real life tension between freedom of expression and digital violence. When we're talking about freedom of expression is not just another right that we have, it is also a pillar of democracy. Any political regime who considers itself as democratic has freedom of expression at its center. Without it, we don't have pluralism, we don't have accountability, we don't have dissident voices, we don't have participation from different sectors of public society, of the academia, of enterprises, of other political forces. We don't have a meaningful public debate. Courts across the globe, whether constitutional tribunals or courts, Supreme Courts, regional human rights courts, and international bodies, agree on something, that definitely freedom of expression is the oxygen of democracy. It is a very important right. But the European Court of Human Rights said in the landmark case Handicide v. United Kingdom that freedom of expression does not only protect the ideas that are favorably received, it also protects those ideas that might offend others, might shock or disturb. This principle is essential. Democracies must be open enough to tolerate discomfort. But this discomfort does not mean an empty blank check to attack people. Freedom of expression, as every other right, is not absolute. Across democratic systems, there is this shared understanding that you do have the right of freedom of expression, but it comes with responsibilities. You do not have the right to insult another person. You do not have the right to dehumanize or to incite exclusion against them. Hate speech precisely sits at this boundary. When an expression targets individuals or groups based on factors such as ethnicity, nationality, gender, age, political conviction or ideology, or the role that they have in a society, it undermines this fabric of society, their human dignity, their safety, even their ability to participate in public life. So it can even affect, it can even seize the democratic expression that we have as a society, because freedom of expression used wrongly, could become a tool of exclusion. And this is a criteria that is shared by many high courts across the globe, because even in systems with very strong protections for freedom of speech, such as United States, speech loses protection when it incites imminent violence. And this is not something that just lies in theory. We see it in practice. Social media has fundamentally altered the scale, the speed, and the impact of a message, of an expression, of a speech. Online platforms clearly are designed to reward emotional engagement with their algorithm, something that causes us anger or happiness or fear or outrage, that maybe pushes us to share it or to like it or to comment something about it, is a publication, a video, a picture that is going to appear to other people due to the algorithm. But combined with the anonymity factor, because other people might create profiles in social media not in accordance with their identity. They might create a fake profile, a fake account. And this evidently creates the ideal environment or conditions for harassment or for hate speech to spread rapidly and without accountability, because people are not necessarily responsible for what they say online, because they are not showing their identity, their names, their faces. They're hiding behind a mask. So what once required an organized structure now requires only a post, a share, or a coordinated campaign. For human rights defenders, for journalists, for activists, this has profound consequences. Online attacks are rarely isolated. They are usually coordinated, systematic, strategic, and their goal is not debate. It is silencing voices who express dissent. And in many contexts, like where I am from, the global south, digital harassment operates as a prelude to offline violence. And this is a context in which we might analyze, in this specific case, the Jeannine Dauder case that I'm going to develop a little bit further. Jeannine Dauder is a Peruvian human rights defender. She's a woman who was the executive secretary of a national coalition of human rights organizations in my country, in Peru. She became the target of a Facebook post where she was accused wrongly of being a criminal, a terrorist sympathizer, and someone who defended murderers. The language was clearly defamatory, it was offensive, aggressive, and it was clearly shaped, it was clearly designed to be hostile against her for being a human rights defender and clearly for being a woman as well. She was targeted by those two factors. And this post was not out of the blue. It's a post that was situated in a very difficult context in my country. Political instability, growing hostility toward civic society organizations, coordinated attacks from radical extreme groups against feminists, journalists, and human rights defenders, those who were against the agenda that these groups promoted. And definitely, this contributed to an increasing democratic erosion in my country. So, Meta, which is the company, the holding behind Facebook, decided not to remove that content because they argued that it technically did not violate its bullying and harassment policies that they manage internally as a company. But this decision showed the whole world a broader problem in content moderation. Formalistic analysis cannot be divorced from context, from the specific reality of each country, of each territory. But the Oversight Board took a different approach when it analyzed the case, when it finally got the case to them. They decided to conduct a contextual analysis, and they did not only examine the words of the message, but the political environment, the pattern of harassment, the vulnerability of Jenny Dauder, which was the individual targeted, and the foreseeable offline consequences, because they were basically asking for her help, since they were calling her a terrorist sympathizer and a defender of criminals. They were trying to rally people against her, and they were even showing her address to everybody in the public, clearly inciting violent acts against her that could have either cost her her life or her family's life. And this recognition from the Meta Oversight Board is important because the Meta Oversight Board ordered that content to be removed. And they explicitly recognize that Jenny Dauder, the human rights defender, was at a heightened risk due to her role in our society. And this recognition is not symbolic. It has legal, ethical, and policy implications, of course, because human rights defenders, those who defend the rights of others, because of what they do, because of their role, they are exposed to more risks. More people who violate rights want to silence them, whether by force or by harassment. And that's why it's important to especially protect them due to the important role that they play in society. And this decision from the Meta Oversight Board, it's important. It's a landmark decision because it affirms that content moderation cannot be context blind. Context matters. And a speech that may be tolerable in one environment can definitely be dangerous in another. And also, it acknowledges that human rights defenders are at a heightened requirement of protection because they are targeted as part of a broader delegitimization of human rights institutions, and of democracy itself. And also, it is important, this decision, because the Meta Oversight Board basically decided that digital governance should not only be narrowly be imported from a US-centric criteria of a free speech doctrine. It should step up into global platforms as a more global, broader international standard of protection of human rights, because it is important to have stronger contextual evaluation frameworks, such as what the Meta Oversight Board ordered to the company. And there is faster escalation when human rights defenders are targeted. So it is important to have swift and effective answers. And it's important also for the personnel over there to have better training on the regional political dynamics, because they are specific to each region and to each country. They cannot look it with a lens of a United States reality, because it is different in Europe, it is different in Asia, it is different in Latin America, and it varies from country to country. And it is important to have an enhanced protection against coordinated harassment. So what the Meta Oversight Board did was recognize the fundamental truth. Platforms such as Facebook cannot be neutral intermediaries. They need to decisively and actively shape civic and democratic participation spaces. They just cannot be silent. And that also brings forward the topic of artificial intelligence. Because nowadays, these platforms, social media, these companies, they rely heavily on AI-driven and automated moderation systems. So there's not a person anymore who is manually doing that.
Apologies, my apologies, Renzo. Yes? But we just need you to wrap up because everyone had about 15 minutes and you're over. Ooh. So if you wouldn't mind just wrapping up. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. 20 seconds. Thank you so much. Apologies for that. So they rely on AI-driven moderation systems, but these tools are not necessary to operate at scale. They're not sufficient. There needs to be keywords, patterns that they can detect, but AI cannot fully understand context, like political repression, historical persecution, gender-based violence, or other realities of human interaction. So automated moderation, and that's my conclusion, must never replace human analysis. And although freedom of expression is important and is a protected right, it's not a blank check to target others or to spread hate speech. Let's protect civic spaces in online platforms and the rights of others. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. All right. So we have just about 20 minutes for questions. I'll take a few questions and then turn it over to the speakers, and then we'll do another round and we'll see how many rounds we can get through. So let's get started. Who has questions?
Thank you for your great presentations. I have a question for Professor Bauvois. You explained that far-right feminist movement received support from millionaires, media owners such as Bolloré or Sterrin. Could you explain the form this support takes and why major business leaders at the head of multinational promote identity-based anti-migrant narrative rather than globalization? Thank you.
And then the third one, was there another one? Did I miss one? So you're the third one. Okay, great.
Hello. Thank you for your valuable speeches. My question is, when we look at the today's rhetorics, when it comes to far right, it's quite observable to see there's a desire to bring back some old, ancient Greco-Roman values into today's mindset, as the Europe is on fight against some different agents, such as foreign men, feminization, political hypocrisy, you call it. While these ancient Greco-Roman times were being seen as the good old times and the peak moment of so many things, such as the war-making arts, aesthetics, history, and some other stuff, the way the terms of woman being addressed was quite debatable, because the woman was being seen as the inferior of men than men. And when it comes to political participation, we were seeing that women were not able to vote for the important matters. They were seen equal to children and slaves. It was not common to see a woman voting for some important matters in the city of, in the agora of Greek cities. But today's, when we look at the, again, today's far-right feminism rhetorics, I thought you said something. Okay. Yep, why not? Today's far-right feminism put women into the political sphere by expecting them to act an action, take an action by organizing some protests, publishing or posting regular posts to influence policymakers or the ordinary citizens' behaviors or the way they're thinking. So how far-right feminism address and conceal that contradiction? Thank you for your answers.
Okay, great. So the first question was direct. Oh, and that would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your question. It was, yeah, you in the back. So yeah, I didn't really have time to develop on that. But the link between Bolloré and Sterrin quite clear. So first of all, we know, but we don't know the detail, that they have received funds and money, because they could not be that professionalized without any fund. And they are an association that doesn't receive any public fund. So of course there are no numbers, there is no proof, but it's quite clear that the money is coming from somewhere. And in terms of influence, they do have a lot of visibility in a lot of media outlet that belongs to the Bolloré media sphere. So they have access to many medias, like in terms, as I said, of like being interviewed, to have even their own program on certain of his channels. And Sterrin, we know, maybe not everybody knows in the room, but he has really a strong, it's much more than just an ideological agenda. He actually has a vision of what France should be. And for him, he wants the France to go back to the way it was. There is a lot of references to Catholicism. So it's a very civilizational like conquest that he wants, and he's been putting millions of euros in order to reconquer France and make it the way he wanted to be. And he has been clearly also giving money and giving space for that type of group, including the Nemesis Collective. So it's quite clear that they are getting a lot of traction, and that's why they have been able to reach an audience that hasn't been reached before by any group of that type. And why, you may ask, like, why are they doing that? It's clearly they have a very strong ideological agenda, and even it's a reconquest. And for them, they are instrumental. It's part of a strategy, and they think that these young women, they are able to attract an audience that maybe other actors from this milieu wouldn't get. So for them, it's quite clear that, yeah, we are going to help them because they are useful for our quest. I hope that answers your question. And there was the other question, but I'm not sure to who it was, like...
I can actually say something, but it was a more general question, I think. But I think it's interesting to think of the work of Naomi Klein. She wrote a new book called Doppelganger. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was a lot about conspiracy theories. And one of her arguments is about mirroring tactics. So the right, a lot of the far right, also the far right feminists, far right women, are also mirroring the discourses, the tactics, the ideas of the earlier left-wing feminist movements. And how complicated it is. There's also a gray area where actually if you look at the ideas purely, you would see overlap, you know? And so, for instance, you mentioned gender-based violence, right? So I was, so the group Nemesis also focuses on gender-based violence, that their victim can be victim.
Absolutely.
Which I think is the perfect idea of that as well. And it's very hard. It's one of those, it's a bit like what we were talking about, the sexualization of children. Is if you focus on victimization like that of the vulnerable people in society, it's really easy. I mean, it's an easy tactic to gain a lot of support, as a matter of fact. And at the same time, they're called nemesis, which is vengeance. Which is very aggressive. So they really combine this focus on vulnerability and being aggressive. I think as such, that's also something we've seen in left-wing feminist. I mean, left-wing is also a vague term, of course, but earlier feminist movements. So your question is quite difficult in a way, to see how you can distinguish that and what values you can bring on board to distinguish these new feminists from these older feminists. Of course, we can do this, but the rhetorics are very slippery. Yeah? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if I can just briefly comment, I totally agree with what you said. And it's even difficult to see them as they are. And they've been, for instance, interviewed on the BBC, because they can also speak English, which is rare for French people. They've been interviewed on the BBC to comment on the Pellico case. And they introduced them as a feminist organization fighting for gender-based violence. No, they didn't even check that they were actually from the far right. So that tells how they are able to blur the line. And you mentioned, how can they reconcile the fact that the far right is usually considering women as lower, and there's a lot of anti-feminism? So it is, like, how do they play with that? It's really interesting, because at the same time they present themselves as hyper-feminine. They are extremely pretty. A lot of them are even using cleavage, let's call it as it is, to have this really like attractive image. But at the same time, they are presented by the far right, and also they consider themselves as warriors, that they are like the fighters, and they are actually very much admired within the far right milieu that is, as we know, very masculine and very male-oriented. So they are playing with that, and they are trying to navigate it, and it seems to be working for them. But yeah, from the outside, it's quite hard to see how they can reconciliate the image that they have and who they are as women. So I don't know if that answers your question, but...
So thank you. And please welcome me in thanking all our speakers and just, yeah, just...